Influence and inspiration can come from anywhere. A scary dream in a Colorado hotel created The Shining. Spielberg, listening to Earth, Wind and Fire in his car, created one of the greatest thrill sequences of the 1990s. The chestburster in Alien was inspired by Francis Bacon's 3 Studies for Figures at the Base of Crucifixion. Norman Bates' house behind the motel comes straight out of Edward Hopper's House by the Railroad. Freddy Krueger emerged from an LA Times article about mysterious deaths. Inspiration can come from anywhere at any time. Today, we're going to take a deeper look into 2015's Baskin, a Turkish horror film directed by Can Evrenol. It's a movie that takes the audience to the brink of hell, and then some. We'll see the many influences that make this film so effing magical in that nightmarish way that all genre fans know and love. My name's Sean Mazeral, and welcome to Nocturnal Horrors. In Baskin, a squad of cops respond to a call for backup, which leads them into a hell they did not know existed. The film seems to be broken up into 3 main sequences as opposed to 3 acts. There's the restaurant sequence in which we learn of each cop. 3 seem ignorant, full of machismo, boisterous, and downright idiotic, while 2 of them, Arda and Remzi, become the 2 that the audience can relate to the most. Connecting characters. It's the banter over dinner that screams Reservoir Dogs, where we learn the personalities of each cop through dialogue in the same way we learn of Mr. Pink or Mr. White or Mr. Brown, etc. And just as we learn about these characters through dialogue, it's the exact opposite for the father. The father is visually Colonel Kurtz from Apocalypse Now. When director Can Evrenol brought on the car park attendant with a rare skin disease to play the lead antagonist, he had him watch a few films. Knowing his star had never acted in anything other than as an extra in Evrenol's short film version of Baskin, they watched A Nightmare on Elm Street, which helped shape the philosophy behind the stalking of a person within their nightmares, The Descent, whose adapted underground cave creatures coincides with the naked, shaky, quick contrasting, sharp movements within the cult's blood orgies, completely opposite of the stiff rigidness of the cops. Hellraiser, to see the otherworldly existence of Pinhead and the Cenobites where pain and pleasure go hand in hand. A new dimension of sexual ambiguity and grotesqueness that the cops had never seen before. And finally, Apocalypse Now for Marlon Brando's character and overall presence. As an interesting side note, after the director showed Mehmet Sarahoglu, who plays the father, the script, the actor created several pieces of artwork depicting the visions and interpretations of specific scenes. This artwork eventually became the centerpiece of an art book that was created specifically for a gallery. With the father's real-life skin disease being a potent and crucial part of the film, his presence is akin to Adam Pearson in Under the Skin, and of course part of Todd Browning's collection.
One of us, one of us. Who will gobble? They're going to make you one of them.
The connection between these 3 characters, that of Arda, Remzi, and the father, has many influences as well. Arda, the youngest cop and the one we respond to the most due to his nightmare in the opening sequence, is that of Danny Torrance in The Shining. He has this ability to see things but doesn't understand it enough in order to harness it. Remzi is an archetype of Dick Hallorann in Stephen King's novel, someone who understands the power of The Shining and is able to act as a mentor to Arda. The father is the presence of the Overlook Hotel, quickly taking over anything it brings to its realm. These 3 also represent the Star Wars saga, with Remzi being the Obi-Wan Kenobi character, Arda as a young Luke, and the father as the Sith Lord hunting down anyone in their nightmares who have this psychic power. Enter the Void. Frogs are doombringers in mythology, part of the plagues of Egypt, and some thresholds in Magic the Gathering. In Baskin, they represent the coming of the hallucinatory world in the film. The more frogs, the darker and twisted the realm becomes. As these signs are there but not understood, as people tell them the dangers they are about to seek out, the cops choose to enter the world anyway. Once they cross the threshold, their lives will be turned upside down. They have entered the Twilight Zone, about to stay in the Overlook Hotel or some Stepford or Samford town, the Inn of Calvaire, the ordeal in English, that sadistic house in Texas, any Lynchian world, or the Beyond Hotel that sits on a gateway to hell. Willingly or not, the cops enter a domain like none other, and getting out will prove difficult with an eternal loop of confusion that they might never escape. Can Evrenol grew up in Turkey, petrified of horror movies. It wasn't until he was about 16 that he saw films by Gaspar Noé, David Lynch, John Carpenter, and George Romero that the gateway into horror opened, and then he couldn't resist them. He grew up in a country where Stephen King, Metallica, Tremors, and Police Academy were huge draws. Two of his favorite films became The Fly and The Goonies. He lived in a place where one day you'd have an LGBT parade, and on the very same street the next day would be a pro-ISIS parade. The movies they had were mostly comedies or art house films with very little in between, leaving Turkey to have a subpar, often cliché horror genre. His short film Baskin made it into Sitges in Spain, considered to be the greatest genre festival in the world. His short played before Eli Roth's Green Inferno, only to later party with him and have Roth buy the option rights to Baskin. But it never worked out. Instead, his mother was a major backer in the film, and Evrenol made it himself, shot in 28 days, all at night, and 90% of the crew didn't know about The Shining or H.P. Lovecraft, but knew that Evrenol directed commercials, so it would be fine. It became only the 7th Turkish film to get US distribution. Perhaps the most important musical moment, other than the sly Cannibal Holocaust music that played when one of the cops gets stabbed in the eye, is the song played in the vehicle as they drive towards their demise, showing off the camaraderie of the squad. But the main music for the soundtrack comes from 80s synth, John Carpenter, Ennio Morricone, Clint Mansell and the Kronos Quartet, and Only God Forgives. During the editing process, this music was the soundtrack for the rough cut before the composer was brought in. The influences are everywhere. Can Evrenol has also listed Lovecraft, Once Upon a Time in Anatolia, and Frontiers as partial inspirations. Like every film, Baskin is nothing without its influences. All of these small nods of the past create a style, tone, mood, and story that delights in its chaos, confusion, hell, and cinematic beauty. It's been deemed a Baroque puzzle. It's a realm that has so many different pieces from so many others, but make no mistake, Can Evrenol's Baskin is in a world completely on its own.